young dancers and dancers of all ages and parents and teachers and everyone who might be curious about the topic of how to master your auditions. Now, in the Ask the Expert series, we present a series of conversations, really. I wouldn't even call them interviews because these are just chats with masters in the dance field who have things to share with our participants, with our viewers. And we found that you guys are actually very much appreciating these, and we have tens of thousands of people tuning in, and this video obviously will live on the Youth America Grand Prix site. So when at a later time somebody might like to know more about auditioning and any of the Ask the Expert series subjects, you're very welcome to check that out. And by the way, for all the future sessions, if you have questions in advance of the session, please send those questions to ask@yagp.org. ask@yagp.org. And so some questions have been sent in by email. Also, as you're watching this video live, please feel free to ask additional questions for John. And we'll have our producer, Monitor, who will share those questions with me, and I will ask them to John if time permits. Hopefully, we'll get to your questions, as many of them as we possibly can. Now, John Meehan does not need really an introduction because in some ways, John, we consider him one of the godfathers of Youth America Grand Prix, because when Larissa Savelyev, the artistic director and founder of YAGP, when she first had the idea, she needed the support of the big companies, people who believed in her. And one of the people who truly believed in this idea right from the start was John Meehan, who at that point was the artistic director of the second company of American Ballet Theatre, ABT2. And at that point it was the studio company. And indeed the prize, the very first Youth America Grand Prix competition in 2000 had the grand prize of a contract with a studio company. Yeah. And for many years you've chaired the jury. For many years you've been a juror at competitions around the world. Sure. You've been artistic director of many different companies, and now you are going to be the artistic director of the USA International Ballet Competition in Jackson, sort of the original ballet competition of the United States. So this gentleman right here knows all about auditions, all about the do's and don'ts. He's seen literally thousands of dancers. He's hired hundreds of dancers. So this is the man to ask about auditioning. And as this is, you see us in our winter clothes. This is December. This is when, January and the beginning of next year is when everybody will be sending out their audition videos. So this is the time to talk about auditions. Now, before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsors, because without them we could not do what we do here at Youth America Grand Prix. The Youth America Grand Prix 2018 sponsors are Block, Capizio, Shakot Freed, Dance Media, the publishers of Dance Teacher, Dance Spirit, and Dance Magazine, as well as Point Magazine, Discount Dance Supply, Dance Europe Magazine, Eurotard, Gaynor Minden, Grishko, Harlequin Floors, and Russian Point, as well as Sylvia Company. So we have these wonderful companies helping us create the opportunities that we do for young dancers worldwide. And now, without much further ado, we will start with the questions for Mr. John Meehan. So, John, well, first of all, as people are sending in their auditions, is there one general advice that you would just give as people are trying to wrap their head around where should they send their video, what should they put on the video, things of that nature?
The most important advice,
yes.
Keep it short.
Keep it short.
Because artistic directors and school directors are busy people. They get a lot of videos, and if they see full pliés in every position and you turn to the other side and start with they start to fast forward.
Right.
So.
And you don't want that.
Well, no. Although you can see a lot with fast forwarding, and if it looks interesting, you stop again and watch. But it's much better to have a concise video, and I think it's important to show. If you're going to show classroom video, I think it's important to show a shortened bar that really shows off your limbs, your physique. That your training is obvious. That flexibility and control at the bar are clear. And then when you come to the center, we're interested in seeing adagio, pirouette abilities, jumping, and point work with ladies, and double tours for men. But a short video is much better. And of course, if it's a performance video, it needs to be a clear video.
Right. And when you say short, what do you mean? Like how short?
Well, as short a bar as you dare, you know. I would say I would
what
do.
Would be, give us
do some full pliés, some pliés. I would do some tendus, maybe dégagé, rond de jambe, but very, very little. You need to get to grand battement and développé fairly quickly. The tendus are going to show off, you know, your training, your alignment, your placement. But whether it's tendus or dégagés or rond de jambes or that all is not going to, you know, we don't need to see too much detail there.
Right.
Well, with développé, you need to see the height, the turnout, and flexibility there. And then with grand battement, you get real sense of flexibility. Yeah, and pliés will show turnout in the hip joint. So those things are key, you know.
Right. And so we basically what you have to see is the dancer's body and how in control, how much have they mastered their body, right? So I think in that sense, the framing also has to be important, right? What kind of framing should the dancers?
Well, I think it's important that the dancer it doesn't look too small in the frame,
right?
You know, so it's a good. It doesn't have to be super produced these days. iPhones are pretty amazing things.
Yes.
What I think is important is to have good contrast with the background. So, for instance, if you're going to wear black tights, say you're a man, you want to wear black tights, don't shoot against a black background.
Right. Well, some normal, like common sense things, like make sure you're visible, but you've seen all kinds of
and
videos.
Clear lighting. Yeah.
Clear lighting. Okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be super produced. You just need to film it and then check it and see that you're big enough in the frame, that there's enough light on you, that you can see your shape clearly, which means what you wear is important as well. We can talk about that in a minute.
Very important, and that's a separate question, what you wear. But even like, okay, so we have a phone. Like, is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Is it okay to like send a video that's a high-resolution video shot on the telephone?
If it looks good, sure. Absolutely.
Vertical or horizontal?
I would say, I would think maybe vertical at the bar, horizontal in the center.
Right.
That would be what I'd go for, but maybe horizontal.
So two separate videos then?
Possibly, or just switch over, when you get to center.
Right. And so when you look at these, do you find that certain dancers, well, other than the talent, like in the way they audition, certain dancers you go like, that's a good audition video. Like, what do you find some of those auditions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which ones? What are the marks of a good audition video?
Clarity is important. Clarity in the contrast between the dancer and the rest of the studio, and I think clarity in technique as well. So a nice sharp focus when a person tendus to the side, you can clearly see the leg, the shape of the leg.
Close-ups? Do you like
not
close-ups?
Necessarily.
No,
I don't think so.
See the full body.
Yeah, I think full body. It's nice sometimes. I always like it if a dancer introduces a video. So, for instance, a nice head, close-up of the head, and just simply say, "Hello, my name is. This is my age, and this is my video. I hope you enjoy it." Something simple like that.
So this is a good question because it's called a slate. So do you want dancers to slate themselves, saying, John Smith, age 13, what else? Where they come from? What else should they put on the slate? Name and age.
Name and age. You could talk about you could talk height. No, I don't think so. I think just name and age is important. Again, you don't want to make it long.
Right. Short as possible.
But when you're auditioning in person, you usually have a headshot and a body shot.
Right.
So the little introduction, slating, is that what you call it?
Slating, yeah.
The introduction with a close-up of the face is sort of like a headshot.
Right. So you get to see the face because the face is a huge part of the performance. Your expression and just your features. That's all Should they wear makeup? Should they make
Yes,
themselves up?
I think absolutely. A little.
Okay.
You know,
ladies,
I think just a
take
little
note.
makeup.
Yes, well, right, because you need to imagine them as they would be on stage.
Right.
You know, dancing in your company or performing at your competition or whatever, you know.
Right.
Okay, so you've mentioned what should dancers wear.
Right.
Well, what should they wear?
Well, I think a dancer should wear what makes them look good. You know, I think sometimes you could ask your dance teacher or a sensible friend what makes you look good, because some people get into these backless things, or, you know, into fancy leotards, and I think a simple leotard and tights for women. And I personally think men look best in a leotard top or a t-shirt that's very tight to the waist and belted tights, you know. But something that shows your form, that clings to the body, shows off the legs and feet. You know, some women look good in halter tops, some look good in a different. I think whatever you look good in, whatever you feel good in, and I don't think it needs to look too costumey. It should be simple.
Right, because you know, I think dancers. It's kind of like auditioning is like actors when they're performing. They have to come in character as the role or whatever. Some people, you know, dancers, you know, they want you to see them as they would be on stage.
Right.
So how important is that for you, for them to come in as Kitri or whatever?
Well, I think we in the ballet, classical ballet world, we're very used to auditioning people in a class and in a studio, and I think it's important to come in and look like an academic dancer, not too academic, but not too theatrical. You know, I think if you're going to do a video and you want to show yourself on stage, find some footage of you dancing on stage.
Well, and also, like, you mentioned bar and center. So you like to see both, you know, bar work and center work. And do you want to see classical pieces? Like, what pieces are best to audition with? Like, is there a recommended piece that the dancers should audition with?
Not necessarily a variation. A variation is a good idea if it suits, but I think you can do. I think in the center it's important to do adagio, small jumps, big jumps, and of course, adagio pirouettes, small jumps, big jumps, and point work, and probably the pirouettes on point, and the jumps on point even. But I think it's important to show those elements. And you can do that in a combination. I really think it's also important to have music of some sort. It can be recorded music. It doesn't have to be live music. And,
right, that was one of the questions we got.
For me, I don't mind if the combination finishes and the music goes on and it just fades out. But I think it's important that you have appropriate music for the exercise.
Right.
Because we also are looking for musicality.
Right, because this is important. And
phrasing, and you really can't see musicality without music, and certainly phrasing is when you're phrasing a dance movement against music. That's when you can really see something sophisticated. So I think it's important to have music.
Right, because even, you know, well-known variations, everybody has their own slightly different way to fill the music, and to feel the music and to fill the music with their movements. So that's important for you.
Absolutely.
And both as, you know, for auditioning for a company or a competition, just as much as for, you know, schools, I would imagine, right?
Right, absolutely.
Because as a teacher, you want to see how musical is your student. How do they process music with their body, right?
Right.
So, and by the way, this kind of introduces the subject of auditioning for different things. Can you use the same audition video for different purposes, like to get into a summer program versus to audition for, like, maybe some summer programs, or, you know, like, should there be different audition videos for different purposes?
I think again, a clear, simple audition tape or video can work for everything. I think it's important that you look at any rules that might be put forth for either a competition or a school as far as video is concerned. I think it's important to know that you're submitting something that's appropriate. There may be stipulation that it's only classroom video. So you don't want to send something and have them...
Right, definitely see what people are asking for.
But for a company, I think it's important, as long as it's clear and short, I think it works. I've had videos where people show a duet or a group dance, and don't tell me who it is that's auditioning.
So you're like, I'd hire one of you, but which one?
Yeah, exactly. I'd hire that one if it's you. So that's really important. These days, however, people have a way of kind of putting a little elliptical light around somebody or a little arrow over their head.
Right.
And that's helpful.
Editing techniques.
But again, as long as you're big enough. I mean, if everybody's like this, it's very hard to tell.
Right. So unless you're a clearly visible soloist, please, use one of those little arrows to point out, or maybe descriptions. That's a good question also that we got. How important is it to send a cover letter with the video and maybe say, in this dance I was the third person from the left, and by the way, here's my life story. Do you look for a cover letter for the way a person expresses themselves along with the audition, or do you just need name, tape, done?
I think it's better for a resume, or a CV, or whatever you call it. But I do think, again, brevity is important. A director of a company is not going to sit down and read a long bio about a dancer. They're going to look and see if they're the kind of dancer they want, and then they're going to look for their height, because they may be, as a director of a company, may be looking for a tall dancer. Maybe the tall dancers have all left and they're looking, or vice versa. They may be looking for a short dancer because all the men in the company are short, so they need shorter women for them to partner. The same for men. You never know what directors are looking for. So I think that also brings up the issue of getting devastated by a rejection. I think it's very important to just to be as kind of strong in yourself as you can be, and to be philosophical. I was not the kind of dancer they were looking for.
Right, because so
often you were not.
Well, and it doesn't have to do with your ability, because
Absolutely.
I think, in general, we tend to personalize things, and
Exactly.
we tend to think that if, because I'm sure a lot of people tuning in now, they'd be like, well, if only I had sent in that perfect audition video, I would have got that job, or I would have gotten into that program. But what you're saying is, often it has nothing to do with what you present. You should certainly present your best self.
Right, exactly.
But if you don't get chosen, it's not necessarily because you have a bad tape.
No, unnecessary. No, not at all. Yeah.
And by the way, any preferred formats? Like, as you're getting all sorts of requests and auditions now for the USAIBC at Jackson, for the competition in Jackson. So are there any formats that are easier for you that you prefer?
Well, I'm not sure. What you mean?
Well, I mean that there are different video formats, right? Like there is MP4. There's different ways to encode a video. Is there one that you prefer? Do you prefer DVDs? Do you prefer them in email?
As long as they work in my machine.
Or like sometimes there's a link. So do you like links?
The links are great because it can all be there in either on the page or on in an email. These days, in email, you can do the whole. Everything you need. You can include your headshot, your body shot, and a dancing video. And personally, I like it. I like Vimeo. Somehow Vimeo works really well. But a link that works, so YouTube links as well. Right. I think they're great because it can come in an email. You don't. It doesn't have to come in the mail.
Right, and you're
not also carrying something around.
You can also check it on your phone without, clogging your memory.
Yeah, and you might be in the office and you might think that person was interesting, and you're at home, you have your computer with you, and so you can go back to that email and look. So it's you sort of carry the package with you. It's a good thing.
It is a good thing. So do you do that? Like when you, how do you review your auditions? Do you just go through all of them and then like the ones that are interesting to you, you mark them and come back to them? How do you review them?
How do I? It's. I think as a director of a company, I always tried really, really hard to look at them all. But I have to tell you that a lot of directors, they sometimes don't even come into the room when somebody comes to audition in a company class because they're very busy people,
Right. So their assistants then watch and then tell them who's interesting.
Exactly. And that's something we need to talk about too, coming to a company and auditioning, or again auditioning in a big group. But I tried very hard to look. I would get, dozens of them, and so I would fast forward through things.
How many seconds do you need to see before you know that this is your dancer or not your dancer?
I don't know. It varies.
On average.
It depends. It depends. Sometimes you can tell from the first tendu that the training is not sophisticated enough.
Right.
Sometimes sometimes you're fascinated. The line in the leg captivates you, and so you do not fast forward and you keep watching. Right. Occasionally, I would go out and call a colleague and say, "Come and look at this."
Wow!
Yeah,
wow, those are really
at
good
ABT.
ones.
I sometimes go and knock on Kevin's door and say, "Look at this video."
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of dancers actually have got through because of that recommendation, to the company, because a busy director like Kevin would not have time to see every single video, but somebody who, say, is at a second company or with the school, a lot of people watching your auditions are people who are not necessarily making the decision, but helping somebody else make the decision for them if they're too busy.
Right? Exactly.
So the video part is that, if we were to summarize it, keep it short, frame yourself well, make sure that there is contrast between you and the background, whatever the background is. If you're in a group, make sure it's clear to the person who's watching the tape who you are. Right. And definitely with music, which could be live or recorded.
Absolutely.
Most important part is how do you move to the music. And what else have we forgotten?
And then
anything?
just a comprehensive short selection that shows the whole gamut of training, of line, of control, flexibility, pirouettes, jumps, and point work. Right. And for men, big jumps and tours.
Right. And we also said slate. If you
and a little, just a little slate saying who you are and
your age.
And your age, yeah. And I when I was thinking about this, you asked me to do it. I kept thinking, because I always like classroom videos, but I have seen a few, especially YAGP videos, which are very clear, performance videos, and they're very helpful. If you've been in a YAGP regional competition one year and you want to come back or go somewhere else, often it's just a nice, short, 1-minute variation. You've obviously chosen something that suits you. If it's good, show the whole thing,
Right. As we have questions coming in, like it's a short question. I don't know if somebody asked a question this short or if it was just abridged by our producer. The question is, do Latin American dancers have an opportunity? We're presuming that they're asking do they have an opportunity to be chosen for companies or schools? Which also kind of bridges into a larger question, is nationality of the dancer important to mention in the audition? Is that an important part of the decision?
Yes, it is. It is, because immigration status is important.
Right.
Especially when you're going for a job with a company. A director needs to know if they love a dancer, they really love this dancer, but do they have to then apply for a visa for them? And that's a big issue. And some companies, I believe, will, and some don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the staff to do that. So I think it's important. But as far as Latin American dancers in YAGP, they do very well.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Both, through our semifinals in Brazil and in Uruguay, and literally just even from videos from Latin Americans, are traditionally very emotional and very beautiful dancers, as of course are
well trained.
And
same with USA, IBC at Jackson. We always have Latin American dancers who do very well. I think most competitions have dancers from Latin America that do well. So.
Right.
So keep coming.
Keep coming, Latin American dancers and dancers from around the world. So do mention your name, age, and nationality.
That should be on your bio. That definitely should be.
Right. So we talked about. So these are the auditions, and by the way, we talked about the audition video itself. Tell us a little bit about the process. Where do you send out the audition videos? Do you send them just cold out to the artistic director's attention? Do you call the company and try to find out who to send the audition videos to?
Yeah,
how would you
absolutely.
recommend
you
people
look on
do
the
that?
website, and usually there's something very clearly spelled out in the website as to where people should send audition videos. I think they will have them, and if it's not clear, call the company and find, maybe you ask for the administrative assistant of the artistic director and find out where to send a video, who to address it to.
Right, and then you just email it. And
do make lots of them. What I've done in the past with dancers is sat down with them and said, where do you want to work? And targeted companies that they think they would like to work with may suit them, and then get a video package together and send it out to all of them. And now, of course, you can do it electronically, so you get
with links.
Yeah, you get your photographs and your bio and links to a performance video. Have it all electronically included in email and send it out. Right,
and then you said you like Vimeo and YouTube, basically an easy one-click away sort of video. Okay, that's great. So the advice is make your video, upload your videos on YouTube or Vimeo, and then just find out, send them to as many companies as possible, because, like you said, you never know who's looking for it.
With an audition, timing is everything.
Right.
Absolutely everything.
When's the best time to start sending out your?
Well, I think people really start to look after Nutcracker. So usually there's Nutcracker, there's a break, and then people start to look, because it's getting towards the second half of their year, and some dancers will leave at the end of that time. But if you're late, don't despair, because sometimes at the beginning of a year there's some issues that will keep a dancer from starting, whether it's injury, which is very sad, or some kind of issue at home, or even immigration issues. Something can stop a dancer from fulfilling a contract, and being the person, waiting in the wings with it's very important.
Right. And so another thing that I think we have a phone call, which we're turning off. Basically, the question also that we get a lot is, do you prefer, like, we're going back to the type of video, classroom video versus performance video? Do you prefer one over the other, or do you have time to see both?
I think both. If you have a good performance video, include it with some classroom. But you see so much more in a classroom video. And very few variations show everything off about you.
Right.
Sometimes they show too much off.
Right.
But if you're a jumper, put a jumping variation in. If you're a turner, But I prefer not the big ballerina. The one variation that doesn't show off too much is Raymonda, the variation with the bourrées. I mean, it shows off bourrées, but it takes too long and it doesn't make point enough. Right. I think a video that shows off something quickly is important. But classroom for me is always stronger.
Right, and plus you have, in a performance, you're kind of bound by the length of the piece, right? And if you only have a few seconds to watch, in a classroom video, you can actually edit it to show you best features, and that's probably like, that presents you in a better light. That's easier to like, probably. Right?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, so we, let's go back to sending out the videos. So, January, you're saying, is the best time, because that's when people start looking. But don't despair, because sometimes at any moment during the year, it's all about timing.
Oh, yeah. So you have to go back into that file. You keep ones you're interested in on file. You go back into that drawer and look through, thinking, I need a tall man, or I need a dancer. Need someone who can start tomorrow. Right.
So send your video. You might end up in
the just never know.
File at just the right time.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Latin American dancers were asking, and other dancers, basically send, anywhere in the world you want to dance, just because, anywhere might happen. Like, would you recommend sending to, as many companies as possible? Or what would be your advice to those who are sending out videos in January
especially if you can do a link. It doesn't really cost you anything. If you can get the email address to send it to, and you've done all the work to put together you know, a good headshot, a good body shot, a bio that's not too long. Remember, young dancers are not expected to have done a lot.
Right.
So don't put in that, you know, you're in the church hall at age 6 dancing the Swan Queen. It's not important.
Right.
You know, it doesn't have to be huge. It's not bad because it doesn't have a lot on it. But it needs to have true information, especially height.
Right.
People always either add a few centimeters or
Really?
diminish a few. Oh yeah.
So people shouldn't do that, because when they get to the company,
exactly.
you
need
find
to
out
be-
and then you're disappointed.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And the age needs to be important. It's important
Right.
for the age.
Do
And,
people misrepresent the age sometimes?
no, I've never. I think much less than that
the
extra
height
centimeter.
And that extra centimeter. Okay, so you know, one of my favorite stories is Sarah Lane, who actually has auditioned several times for the company, but a very short dancer who's now a beautiful principal ballerina at American Ballet Theatre. But she herself tells the story of several times being overlooked in a company audition because of her height. But then
I was beside her many of those times. I
you
brought her to many auditions.
Right. And then that one moment of musicality when at the Youth America Grand Prix Gala, there was a music
gala?
malfunction. It was in the early 2000s. I think it was
Kevin might have
2003.
been at that one.
Kevin was at that one.
I think
And
I brought
that's
him.
when that's back when there were tapes, actual tapes, you know, in the machines for, you know, for those of you millennials, you know, in the last century there were cassette tapes, you see, that you would put in machines and they would produce sound. And so the tape got chewed up in the machine, and the entire audience of Alice Tully Hall rose to their feet and sang the variation to the end, and without flinching, Sarah Lane just finished it beautifully and put a big, nice period at the end of that beautiful dancing sentence, and the audience erupted, and Kevin was in that audience, and that's after that he invited her to the company.
It was interesting because in the silence, you could see her musicality.
Right.
Because she'd set it up the way she began the variation.
And you could see it and hear it so clearly that the audience just continued, just started singing along to the music that was happening all along in that silence.
And
the
it's a
audience
very
just
long,
started.
slow variation too.
You know what I mean? And she just finished it beautifully. So the point of that story is that she's a very short dancer, and the first few times she auditioned, maybe they didn't need that short dancer, but her musicality made up for it. So if you're a short dancer, don't despair. Don't add interest
or if you're
to
a
your
tall
height.
dancer, don't despair either. I mean, I think
right.
It sometimes it's catching the imagination of the director. You know?
Right. And you can do that with clear movement that shows you off well. So let's talk about live auditions, because we talk about the videos. This is an important time to send out video auditions. But when you're auditioning live for a company, now there are usually 50 dancers? How many dancers?
Well, there are two ways that it happens. They either have an audition class, and they're a lot often. You know, in a big company.
A lot as in how many?
Sometimes 50, sometimes 40. You know, it's a room full.
Yeah.
And they have different ways of doing it. Sometimes they cut people, you know, in stages. They'll do maybe half the bar and cut people, or even before it starts, and then after bar, and then somewhere in the center. But actually, what's interesting is often the video you send will then prompt an invitation to come to an audition. So that's an important part of it.
So let's talk about this differently, because one way is, you know, one separate conversation is how do you stand out in a room of 50 people all hoping to get that one spot. That's one conversation. The other is like, you know, if you got invited for a personal audition, you know, what are some of the do's and don'ts? So let's talk about the mass audition, the class audition. How do you...
Well, I think it's very important not to do a number on yourself and walk in and think, oh my God, there's so many people, they're never going to like me, and you shrink inside, and you shrink physically too.
Oh, wow.
To the people there.
Wow.
On the other hand, it's important not to come in and be so cocky that you put people off. I think it's... Kevin McKenzie always said he liked dancers who had a good sense of themselves. And I think that's important in when you're standing at a bar, that you have a sense of yourself, that you appear to be somebody with some power, but who is kind of tranquil and calm and in control. You know.
Right, because it is a stressful situation.
Oh, it's very stressful. I remember myself as a dancer. I hated those things. So I was always very sympathetic to people, but
Right.
and I think there's a very simple thing to keep doing. Very simple thing to keep doing to remind yourself to give you, and that's to take deep breaths. It's amazing what short breaths you begin to take when you're under stress,
Right.
and how that will then affect so many other parts of your audition. So I think it's important to try and stay calm and keep breathing. And even if something doesn't go wrong, people have fallen. Cynthia Harvey talks about falling, I think, in front of Lucia Chase when she auditioned. But don't worry about those things. Also, flubbing a pirouette, it's, the people looking have seen it all. They have a very broad mind, and they're looking for things beyond perfection. They don't want to see something that's perfect. I mean, they'd like to, but they are looking for potential. They're looking for, the training that somebody has. So you may not do something perfectly, but your training may be obvious, and it may be the kind of training they want, So if something bad happens during an audition, try to brush it off and keep going and stay in charge of yourself with a good sense of yourself right to the end of class.
Right, because another story that comes to mind is Paolo Arraiz, who is now, I believe, with Boston Ballet. But when, for the first time in Youth America Grand Prix, Paris Opera Ballet School started offering a scholarship, so many people wanted that scholarship, and the scholarship went to a Brazilian boy who actually didn't have a contemporary variation at all. He just came with a classical variation, and she, the lady representing it was, I believe it was Claire Beaulieu, who was there representing Claude Bessy was supposed to come, and she couldn't, so she sent Claire in her place, and she was like, well, let's see what he can do as a contemporary dancer, and he didn't have anything prepared, so he pretty much borrowed a cassette tape, from somebody in the hallways, and he just kind of like went around, kind of rolled around.
Just improvised?
What it was is that his contemporary piece that was choreographed for him was very simple. So she's like, I can't see what he can do. I want to see something else. And he didn't have another piece prepared. And so he fell off every pirouette. He just jumped around to music that he borrowed from somebody else in the hallway. And she gave him the scholarship because she saw the passion. She saw the training and the body that she wanted. She's like, I can do something with that dancer.
Right.
He may not be where I need him to be yet, but I can get him there.
Right.
So the important part for him, to what you're saying, is to actually present yourself wholeheartedly and not be discouraged when you fell off the first pirouette or the second, or messed up the 3 jumps in a row, or kind of rolled around on stage and nobody knows what you just did. The point was he was fully present, and that got him what he wanted, what everybody wanted. That scholarship, that place at Paris Opera Ballet School. So your advice actually is beautifully illustrated by that story and many other stories. So breathe, don't be worried, just present yourself calmly and confidently.
Right.
Is that your...
Excellent, absolutely.
What other advice, what other do's and don'ts in a large class company audition?
Well,
or
again,
a school audition?
what you wear, don't wear leg warmers at all, even the beginning of it. Dress so that every inch of your body is visible, because people want to see the legs, the feet, the waist, the shoulders, So I would say a little bit of makeup is a good thing. Not a lot, just a little. Neat hair. Don't have your hair flying, and certainly no ponytails or anything like that.
Right.
And just stay positive and try to pick up the combinations.
Right. And I also heard other company directors talk about how the dancers disqualified themselves before the directors would disqualify themselves, because when dancers mess up or do something that they were not themselves pleased with, they would just let it show in their faces, and the directors then mirror that emotion, right? So they might have been paying attention to something else, but now they're paying attention to that dancer being upset about them not being perfect. So is that something that you would second?
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking to see somebody. You're actually looking to see how they deal with the stress.
Right.
Because stress in an audition is not that dissimilar to stress on stage, and we have to be graceful under pressure no matter where we are. I think another thing that's really important in a big audition, when you get into the center, make sure that you can see the person who you're trying to impress. Because if you can't see them, they can't see you. In other words, if you're behind somebody, it sounds silly, but it happens so often. People, without realizing it, are hidden, you know?
Right.
And it's very important. Usually lines are rotated and you get a chance to be in the front line, but it's very important, whether it's a company audition or a big audition, that you are clearly visible. So make sure you are clearly visible.
To the one whose attention you're trying to get.
Exactly.
Right. What they say, and if you can't see the camera can't see you.
Right.
So,
and it's the same
so if you don't see that person, the person can't see you. This is important to stagger yourselves, and without, I guess, being rude, try to reposition yourself so you can see that person, and then they can see you.
Right.
What other do's and don'ts?
What are the do's and don'ts?
In a large company audition, because maybe some of them are actually the same for both large company audition and personal audition.
Well, the company audition is a bit different, you know.
Right.
If you have been invited to take company class or school class,
right,
you know, and you're the only person there from the outside, the first thing, normally you turn up early.
Right.
Just be prepared to move if you have taken the principal ballerina's place at the bar without realizing it. And often a principal dancer could come in late and just look at you, and you know that. So just think on your feet and be ready to move if you've taken the wrong place at the bar or somebody's favorite spot. Again, make sure that you're visible. So when you get to the center, if you're in a company situation, most company dancers realize you're there to be seen for an audition, and most company dancers are very generous people. I would say all dancers are generous people, but maybe almost all. And they don't mind that you are standing forward. Because
they know you're auditioning.
You're only there one day.
You're
They're going
trying
to be
get a
there
place.
tomorrow. They were there yesterday, but you have one day to impress people.
Right.
So don't feel you have to stand at the back, because if you stand at the back, you're hidden. And if you're hidden, the audition really, why be there anyway? On the other hand, don't necessarily have to go and stand all the way in the front line. But if it seems like it's an okay thing to do, if people are letting you do that, do that. But I've seen so many times people coming to audition in a company situation and be so self-effacing that it doesn't look good. You're not showing yourself off to your best.
So a lot of it sounds like what you're saying is just be aware, and that kind of like etiquette that you would do in regular life is the same as what you would try to be aware of in an audition situation. You know, try to be aware if you're coming into a new environment that you don't, that you're not insensitive to what is happening normally in that environment. If you're in the wrong spot, just move over. Be polite, be gracious, because these are also, I think what maybe a lot of dancers don't realize that they're auditioning not only with the director of the company, but if they're coming in to audition with the company, they're also auditioning with the other members of the company. Because should you be chosen, these are your colleagues, and you'll either become a part of that body of dancers, or they may not, they may reject you if you come in and be rude, for example, right at the beginning. So because that's your group, so be aware of the group. It sounds like that's also a little bit of what you're saying.
Yeah, I think a little. But I think it's important to be polite, but stand your ground.
Right.
But also be prepared to move, but not move outside the room. Or so far behind the rest of the company that you might as well not be there. So
it's a tough balance to maintain.
It is. It's a tricky thing. And coming when you're the only dancer in a company situation, it's also highly stressful. But it's very, dancers tend to be generous people. And you'll look for the dancer who smiles and is helpful. And then if you need to ask, you can politely ask, where should I stand, or do you mind?
So it's an okay, that's also good, because some people don't know, is it okay to ask questions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, dancers are good people, and they're trying to be helpful. They were all there the same as you are. They were there once, and so usually they're very helpful.
Well, as we wrap up, what would be the one advice just about auditioning or about life in general that because you've seen so much, you've lived a long life in dance, what would you like, because dancers who are tuning into this particular session are dancers who will be auditioning, or hoping to get a job, or hoping to get into a school that will then lead to the job of their dreams. You know, so they're looking to you for your wisdom. What would be some words of advice that you could share with the dancers who are watching now and who will be watching later about auditioning or pursuing their dream of dancing?
I think it's important to retain a sense of yourself. Remember not to take things personally. Try not to let the stress of the situation affect the way you dance. Keep breathing. Be philosophical about what's going on. If something goes wrong, be philosophical about that. Let it go and come to the next exercise with confidence. And just remember that everyone in that room has been, is either sharing the experience with you and is under the same amount of stress, or understands that you're under stress, including all of the people out in the front. And try to believe that they're all kind people, because most of them are.
Well, this is wonderful advice. Thank you so much for
very welcome.
Coming and for sharing your time and expertise with us. For the next session, we will have a discussion of how judges judge at Youth America Grand Prix. That's also a fascinating topic. Lots of Youth America Grand Prix participants will be interested in that. It's happening on January 21 with Franco De Vita and perhaps some other jurors of Youth America Grand Prix. Remember that you can send your questions in advance to ask@yagp.org and keep dancing.
Yeah,
keep dancing. Good luck. Thank you.